Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Comedic Pedro, 1967. Now, the cover photo for today's video it was taken from the TV show Bewitched, which was my mother's favorite TV program. Remember very well as a little boy. That was probably the highlight of her week. She really enjoyed that show. And so Bewitched was a TV fantasy sitcom on ABC, which aired between 1964 and 1972. They had 254 episodes, and I remember seeing quite a few. It's a story about a witch who marries an ordinary mortal man, but vows to lead a typical suburban housewife life. And the star of the show is Elizabeth Montgomery, who plays Samantha Stevens, whom the people call her Sam. And her husband is Darren Stevens, who was played by Dick York, and then later Dick Sargent. And then there's Endora, Sam's mother, who is also a witch, played by Agnes Moorehead. And then there's Tabitha, the daughter of Samantha and her husband, played by Aaron Murphy. And so this character, Samantha Stevens, she's a witch. She has powers of magic, and she'd twitch her nose to cast a spell. And she tried not to do it. She's trying to live a regular life, but she'd feel tempted to do so. And, nobody knew she was a witch. She kept it a secret as much as she could. And so it was really funny. Her husband was kind of would get irritated. I didn't really like him that much, but she was very endearing, this woman, Samantha, because she was a good person. She was pretty and good, very kind, and she would cast these spells, which would she would use magic from time to time for she would be tempted to do it, and that's what made the stories interesting. And her mother was kind of typical kind of difficult mother-in-law who didn't like her husband, so they had a tough relationship. And so it was a wonderful program, and I think probably a lot of suburban housewives in America enjoyed it because maybe they were bored in suburbia with maybe taking care of the home and children. So she was a real hero for women like my mother. Yeah, and I remember watching that as a family. Oh gosh, my mom enjoyed that show because one time we'd watch it as a family. I remember one time I had gotten a package in the mail. And we were watching the show. My brother Mark mentioned it. Oh, my mom got mad because he interrupted, and then I wanted to see the package, and it interrupted this show, which, she didn't. She wanted to watch the show. So, I remember I used to complain as a boy, like, how come I don't get any mail? And my mom started sending off, like, coupons. You get, like, 50 cents they'd send you back, and she put my name in, and you get some, like 2 quarters in the mail, so I'd get some mail. So anyway, it was a real nice TV show, Bewitched, from the 1960s. Now, you'll notice the T-shirt I'm wearing comes from the movie The Wizard of Oz. This was another thing. I remember it was kind of like the high point of the year. Somehow I think usually on a Sunday, somehow we'd find out that The Wizard of Oz movie was playing on television. It seemed like it would play once a year, and this became a big deal mostly because our mother was she'd get excited. Our mother she was a very good person, worked hard, and this I remember this I guess took her back to her childhood because that movie came out in 1939 when my mother turned 15. Wonderful movie with starring Judy Garland, who played the character Dorothy, and then these 3 other main characters. Ray Bolger played the Scarecrow, Jack Haley the Tin Man, and Bert Lahr the Cowardly Lion. And the movie is based on the author Frank Baum's 1900 children's classic, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And then there's Glinda the Good Witch, and the Wicked Witch of the West, who's one of the great villains of all time, played by Margaret Hamilton from Cleveland. And then, of course, the Wizard, played by Frank Morgan. Now, in my church, Self-Realization Fellowship, there was one of the monks, I believe Brother Anandamoy, who referred to this movie as being very spiritual. And because the idea is that, this earth is not, that there's more than this world, we have a heavenly home, and we're all going home. And if you believe in reincarnation, yeah, you'll go there temporarily, but come back to Earth. So if you want to go to heaven permanently, you're going to have to. It's going to take spiritual effort through yoga, meditation, and behavior. Anyway, so we're on a journey. Life is a journey, and that's what Dorothy and her friends were on. They were on this journey, and that's the whole point in life, is that we're not alone. As on our journey home, we have friends along the way who help us. And like these three interesting characters helped Dorothy. And as we travel along, we're all working on things. And these three characters, the scarecrow who needed a brain. We need to develop our minds in life. This is one of the things we have to do in life. And some people, that's really what they need to work on. Others, like the Tin Man, they needed a heart. We need to become kind. This is another thing that many people are working on or need to work on. And then the Cowardly Lion needed to develop courage. Yeah, and again, courage is a very important quality. So as we travel on the journey of life, we're all on a journey, and we all will meet friends who will help us on the journey, and all of us have different things we're working on. So I think that's a wonderful. It's a funny movie. And I remember as a boy, my mom would get excited when the Wizard of Oz was playing, usually on a Sunday night. And I was happy for her, because my mom, she worked so hard. And I think when you're young, you're happy when your parents are happy, because it means they'll, it's easier to get along with them. Although my mother was a very good person, very kind. So The Wizard of Oz, wonderful movie. And we just saw it last Christmas. It was great. Really enjoyed it, because hadn't seen it for a long time. A lot of funny stuff. Now, in the world events, actually, 1967, in the United States, there were a lot of riots, so-called race riots. Black Americans, African Americans in cities who became violent, had these became contagious. And really, it was sort of a release, probably, of frustration for decades and centuries, going back to slavery days. And by then, it had been more than 100 years since slavery ended. And African Americans, had endured second-class citizenship and Jim Crow, segregation, and really restrictions where they couldn't, they were really restricted to low-paying jobs, menial jobs, and so finally, and in neighborhoods in the North, a lot of them, they were all mostly from the South, from slavery days, but then a lot of them were coming north, or had come north in the 1930s especially, or the 20s and 30s and 40s, and then in northern cities they were restricted to certain neighborhoods. They were very frustrated, so there were a lot of riots all over the U.S. in cities. Also in 1967, the Vietnam War, a lot of protests all over the country, because we had this, it seems like we were more and more going to war. The Second World War, and then not long after that, the Korean War, which wasn't even won, and then the Vietnam War, which was the first sort of war that was dragging on and didn't seem to have an end. And here we are now, 2019, 18 years in Afghanistan. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight for there. So there are people, they're frustrated with the Vietnam War. Although I think, in my opinion, I think it was a noble cause in fighting communism, which I believe is a very seductive and attractive, but very dangerous and really a horrible system of government, which I think it was good that we were fighting that. But anyway, it was a very tough war, and a lot of protests all over the country against the war. On January 4th, the musical rock band The Doors released their album called The Doors, and including the song Light My Fire. And when I was in the Philippines, I had a student, Miggy Matute, who he said, "Oh, Mr. Peter, you should get more into music." So, and this was he lent me a cassette tape, and we had like a talent show, and I ended up singing "Light My Fire" at our school, Restless Educational Center. And I'll just sing a little bit of it now, just for the heck of it, since it's Comedic Pedro. The time to hesitate is through. No time to wallow in the mire. Try now, we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. The time to hesitate is through. And then there's several. And and then I'll just wrap it up here. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. So anyway, okay. On January 5th, Charlie Chaplin's last movie, A Confession from Hong Kong, was released. On January 15th, the first Super Bowl was held, which actually was called the AFL-NFL Championship game, and later it was referred to as Super Bowl I. The Green Bay Packers defeated the Kansas City Chiefs 35-10. February 2nd, the American Basketball Association was formed, the ABA, which was really cool. They were a rival league to the NBA, and they had a red, white, and blue ball and the three-point shot, and there was a lot more I think the slam dunk really sort of became popular with the ABA, especially from Julius Erving, whom they called Dr. J. On February 5th, Anastasio Somoza became dictator of Nicaragua, and that went on until 1979. He was a pretty bad dictator. On March 9th, Joseph Stalin's daughter, Svetlana, defected to the United States. Just imagine this, the most famous leader of the Soviet Union, but she got fed up with life in that country. On April 24th, the Philadelphia Sixers defeated the San Francisco Warriors in Game 6 of the NBA Finals to win the NBA Finals for 1967. On April 27th in Montreal, Quebec, Expo 67 started. This was an international exposition, and our family went. You know, my mom was Canadian. I remember that very well. These different countries, and of course I was only 7 years old, but I remember, they had sort of, futuristic, they had candy. Remember, they had this candy that had different layers. I believe we drove there. You go to the different pavilions for different countries. In fact, there's a wonderful book by Farley Mowat, The Boat That Wouldn't Float. And it ends up where he travels on a boat up the St. Lawrence Seaway, and the book ends at Expo 67 in Montreal. So that was a wonderful experience, I remember, as a boy. On April 28th, Muhammad Ali had refused to enter. He was drafted to go to Vietnam into the U.S. military, and he refused to serve, and he was stripped of his heavyweight boxing title. On May 1st, Elvis and Priscilla Presley got married in Las Vegas. On June 1st, the Beatles released the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and supposedly the nickname of the soundtrack's nickname was, or the Summer of Love had the soundtrack for that from that Summer of Love, which I think was 1968. Okay, on the 5th of of March, of June, the 6-Day War started in the Middle East. Israel against Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan, and all these wars, Israel was fighting for its existence, and this was it was quick, but Israel won again, which eventually the Arab countries were pretty angry about this because they were frustrated. They wanted to destroy Israel, and they never could. And actually, it's good that they didn't, because Israel, in my opinion, is a good example for them to follow, because they're doing so many things right. On July 7th, the Beatles released "All You Need Is Love" in London. That song, which all you need is love. October 8th, Che Guevara, who had been trying to foment revolution in South America, specifically in Bolivia, was caught by the Bolivian army and executed. He famously wanted to turn the Andes Mountains to be similar to the Sierra Madre Mountains of Cuba, where the communist revolution in Cuba had originated, but he failed to do that. On October 17th, the musical Hair opened off Broadway in New York City. On July 26th, the U.S. Navy pilot John McCain was shot down over North Vietnam and became a prisoner of war for 5 years, endured unbelievable hardships. I believe he was down to both of his legs broke. I think both arms and both legs broke when he ejected, and then he was tortured, and just an unbelievable story. And actually, he was forced to write a confession that he was by the North Vietnamese, that he was a criminal, a war criminal, and to criticize the United States, which he did because he was so depressed. he was tortured and finally broke. And yeah, he tried to actually. Later he apologized to his father when he was released he felt ashamed, but his father said, you have nothing to shame. Anybody, actually, you couldn't find a person who would not, under enough torture, do the same thing. So he had nothing to apologize for. It was very touching in the Vietnam War. His father was a commander, I think a top commander in the U.S. military, and on every year on Christmas Eve, I believe he would go as far as he could in the north, in South Vietnam, because he knew his son was in the north. Of course, John McCain became the Republican presidential nominee in 2008. Was defeated by Barack Obama in the general election. November 27th, the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour album was released. And on December 5th, Benjamin Spock, who wrote the famous book on taking care of babies and children, Spock and Allen Ginsberg were arrested in New York City protesting the Vietnam War. Now, in 1967, my father turned 43. Both my parents turned 43, and they continue with their lives, very busy and productive. They had a lot of energy. My dad was all his years of hard work, going back to high school and college, and working as a chemist and as a young lawyer, was paying off because he was making good money, and he had a nice home here in Rocky River on Beach Cliff Boulevard. And so he was working hard, although he was coming home a lot more. And he had cut down on his community service. And my mother was real busy raising us 4 children. She had 4 kids to take care of. And they were, my older brother, Mark, he was the first. He turned 15, and he finished at the junior high in the first 6 months of the year, grade 8, and then by September he was in the high school, grade 9. So instead of going right out of our home, which took us to Kensington or the junior high, he was taking a left and going around the bend on Beach Cliff over to Avalon and up to Wager and the straight shot south down to the high school. So he was in high school, starting high school. And Pamela turned 13. She was at the junior high, grade 7 and 8, which, again, that's a challenging situation. So she was just right behind Mark. My sister Patricia was turned 10. She was starting early, the first part of the year, in grade 3 at Kensington in elementary school, and then in grade 4 in the fall. And then I turned 7. I was in grade 1 up until June, and then started second grade in the fall. Now, my memory is, as the years, the year, as you go through every year, there's the seasons come, and of course, we were going to the Bahamas in April. Previously, we'd been going to for Easter. We'd go to Sandusky for an Easter egg hunt at my father's parents' home, Gertrude and Doran Ray in Sandusky. But now in the Bahamas, we would have these Easter egg hunts. We'd generally have Easter in the Bahamas, and I think it might have been by this time, I believe this time we were going to this house on Cistern Key in the Exumas in the Bahamas, going for a month. This was really helped my parents because they were both working so hard and they needed a break, and then, of course, my dad could afford it. The summers, our next door neighbor, Stevie Strawbridge, I think they were moved in by this time. He became my best friend. And one point we started digging a hole. We said we were digging a hole to China. we had a basketball hoop in the backyard. I remember I became pretty good shooting at basketball, though not so good at playing the game, running around. We had a yard. Not a big yard. The front yard was a little bit bigger, and Mark would cut the yard with a hand mower, and the backyard was smaller. We used to have picnics in the backyard with this round wooden picnic table, and have a picnic dinner. For dinner in summer, we'd go out eat in the backyard, and my mother would give my brother Mark the assignment of spraying like a bug spray around the table, so try to keep the bugs away. And there was a little playhouse in the corner I used to play in. And so summers, we used to go every summer. We'd go to Cedar Point. That was fun. And we'd load up the station wagon, drive to Cedar Point on a Saturday. And then by the end of the summer, we'd be going to Lakeside, Ohio for the family reunion. And I'd see, at that time, it was just, we'd go over on a Friday night and stay till Monday night it was the Labor Day weekend. So we just Friday, then Saturday, Sunday, and home on Monday night. And of course, school would start. And the school would start in the fall. Before the school year, we'd go to Zabo's, this shoe store on Center Ridge in Rocky River, get a new pair of shoes. And then in the fall, Halloween was a big deal. We'd getting dressed up for trick-or-treating. And my memory is we'd use a pillow slip to collect the candy, and you carry around this pillow slip, get your candy. My sister Patricia was really good about, not eating her candy too fast, like having one candy bar a day, whereas I tended to eat it more quickly. And we'd always go in November for Thanksgiving to my dad's sister's home in Huron, Ohio. Carol and Dave Wiesenauer and their two daughters, Lisa and Kathy. That was fun. And my dad's brother would drive over from Illinois. Dick, Joan, Mike, and Tracy. My cousin Mike. So it was always fun to see Mike, my cousin Mike. And then Christmas. Yeah, Christmas was all, when you're a kid at Christmas, it's fun. My mom would have these, she put up these stockings. They were like red felt on the, by the fireplace. And there were she had these little stickers from the Happy Soup Club with our names. So that was fun, And you wake up on Christmas morning open your gifts. And so Christmas is always fun with, we were going to church at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in Bay Village, and eventually around a little bit later we moved to St. Peter's in Lakewood. So my brother Mark by this time was in Boy Scouts. Yeah, he was on the road to becoming an Eagle Scout, and Pam was in Girl Scouts. Yeah, and of course they didn't have really the same thing in terms of an award. I think they had the Golden Eaglet, but people weren't really that into it. And Patty eventually got into Patricia got into Girl Scouts, and there was brownies, and we had the park nearby, Rocky River Park, which they'd flood in winter, and you could go ice skating. I didn't really like it that much because I don't know, it wasn't really. Although you could go snow sledding, yeah. That was I think more fun. I was still kind of staying at home, kind of intimidated by kids. Yeah, definitely kids in the park, and just sort of staying at home. And I started watching too much TV, which was not good. But anyway, I came from a good family. So anyway, that's the story of 1967. It was a good year, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care. I'll see you next time.